Hi, my name is Brittany, and today I will be reading The Fish Who Found the Sea by Alan Watts. Once upon a time, there was a fish who lived in the great sea, and because he was just an ordinary fish who had never known anything outside the great sea, he was not really aware that he was in it. He swam up and down and around without ever noticing that he was moving through the water, for the water was transparent. Wherever he moved, it got out of the way of his nose and yet gave him something against which he could push with his tail and so move on himself along. Without it, he could neither swim or live, but for all he knew, he might just well have been moving into empty space. Then one day something peculiar happened to him. He began to think how curious it was that he could swim, for here he was moving up and down and around in the midst of nothing at all, and all by his own power. This, he thought, was surely very clever of himself. And then something else happened. You know how it is when you start thinking about something you do automatically, such as breathing or riding a bike. You begin to get confused. It was the same with this fish. He began to get confused in his swimming. Looking down into waters below him, he was suddenly terrified at the thought that he might forget how to swim altogether and go plunging forever into the darkness. At the moment, all his skills at swimming left him, and he began to fall. He realized then that there was just one chance of saving him, to grab hold of his own tail with his mouth and hold himself up. At once he curled up and made a snap at his tail. Unfortunately, his spine was not quite subtle enough, and he missed. Not yet discouraged, he tried again and again with the same result, so that for some time he whizzed around in circles in frantic pursuit of his own end. The faster he chased his tail, the faster he moved away. This had been going on for some time when he began to realize that he was not getting anywhere, that his life was becoming dull, meaningless, and horribly monotonous. But he was much too frightened to stop. The fish was sure that if he relaxed the chase for a moment, he would plunge headlong into the abyss, and so he redoubled his efforts to save himself, in spite of the fact that he became more and more tired and disgusted every minute. Soon he saw that he was in a hideous dilemma. He must either fall into the abyss or go on chasing his tail. Both alternatives were equally horrifying. He waved his fins in panic and prepared to die. In the meantime, the great sea had been watching this extraordinary behavior with mixed feelings of amusement and sorrow. For the great sea was as loving as it was vast. It gave all the creatures of the deep room to live and swim around. It never intruded upon them, always retiring generously before their noses and letting itself be pushed by their tails so that they could move along. Still more, the great sea always surrounded them in such a way that it bore them up and made itself transparent so that they could see where they were going and enjoy all the wonders of the deep. Yet here was a crazy fish who thought he swam all by himself, who had forgotten himself into panic, and was behaving as no fish should behave. Therefore the great sea called out to the unhappy fish and asked him, "What do you think you are doing?" To which the fish replied, "I'm trying to catch hold of my tail and save myself from falling." "You have been doing that for a long time," observed the great sea, "and you are no nearer the catching than when you started, so why haven't you fallen yet?" "Don't bother me," retorted the fish. "Can't you see I'm busy?" "That's just what I could see," the great sea went on patiently, "but apparently you can't. You haven't caught your tail, you haven't fallen to the abyss, and yet you are still busy. How come? Oh, don't be stupid, snapped the fish. Of course I haven't fallen down because I'm... Goodness! Because I'm swimming! You may well say goodness, said the Great Sea, for how does it happen that you have stayed afloat and been able to swim during all this absurd performance? This was too much for the fish. He stopped his chase and looked around to see who he was talking to. There was no one to be seen, and it was strange, but although he wasn't doing anything himself, he was still floating in the water, though it seemed to him as he were suspended in empty space by some visible force. There now, continued the Great Sea, you thought you were doing it all by yourself? And you never knew that I hold you up for guiding me and wasted yourself in pursuing your own end? For it is me that you live and swim and are able to be a fish, and to you I have given the height and the depth, the length and the breadth, myself in which to swim. From that moment, the fish was happier than the other fish in all the waters of the world. Sitting his own end behind him, where it belonged, he set out to explore the ends of the sea. And he found that whether he moved up or down, to the left, to the right, wherever the great sea expanded before him and supported him, so much that he would swoop and climb and dance in joy, and creatures in his true element out of himself into the sea, where indeed he had been all the time. The end.